If you recall, last week's episode was, well, quite wet, rainy conditions. This week, well, the clouds have parted, giving way to sunshiny conditions and perfect opportunity to get this bad boy on the road. Hey, welcome to this edition of Road Warrior. I'm your host, Grant Roberson. Now this week, we're test driving the 2023 Kia Telluride X-Line edition. And what we like was, of course, the exterior and its pizzazz, specifically with that exterior color, as well as interior comfort, delivering up to 3 rows of comfort. But lastly, might have been those driving conditions behind the wheel, specifically with kind of that steering assist. Now, it's not autonomous, but it's pretty darn close. The one area that really struck me with previous Tellurides is the catering on the inside, specifically right down to the driver with everything they have at their fingertips. So they know how to deliver on the inside, and certainly the sleek exterior brought in here to 2023 as well. But 2 things that have been added is 2 extra trim levels, both the X-Line you see here and the X Pro editions, basically taking that premium quality and, well, adding 1 more level called off-road worthiness. And, well, that's what this model does. First off, giving you a little bit extra ground clearance as well as raised roof rails. Now that may seem minor, but if you're like me and have dealt with the solid pieces, this option allows you to put extra toys on top, different apparatus, without having too much aggravation, because this allows for a great clamp and go. So besides the 2 additional trim levels, there are big changes across the Telluride design here on the outside, most notable at the grille warfare and literally front and center. First off, you may need to take a magnifying glass to see the intricate design changes, but it really enhances this overall grille. In this case, the contrasting glossy black with this particular color really sets off the front end. Also big changes, the lower fascia and the rear fascia, both been enhanced, as well as the fog light design, instead of being horizontal in this vertical stack like you see. But the biggest, more dramatic change to me is the headlight assembly under one clear plastic lens and seeing a much different design. If you recall, the daytime running lights used to be boxed out here in kind of a rope lighting. Now that's been changed to the white vertical lights you see here. When the turn signals are engaged, of course, you'll see it blink from amber to white, amber to white. As for the headlights themselves, the upper 2, that's going to be the headlights. When you engage the brights, as I have here, you'll kind of get this 4-quadrant look. As we talked about last week, a vehicle this size wanting to deliver 3 rows of comfort, well, it better measure up. And, well, it does, falling just shy of 200 inches overall, around about 196 as you see it. Wheelbase fairly stretched at 114 inches. Width, not too bad at about 78 inches with the mirror's height around about 70.6 inches with the added roof rails, which are raised. You're going to see just under 70 inches on the standard model. Lastly is ground clearance, and this is where you're going from 8 inches for the standard Telluride to 8.4. Again, not earth-shattering, but anytime you can lift a vehicle like this up just a little bit more for some added ground clearance, well, I'm all for it. And that's really what sets an X-Line apart than the standard version. At the 4 corners specific to the X-Line and X Pro editions, you're going to get stepped up wheels with a, well, fancy design like you see here. The smoky, darkened look really setting off this vehicle quite nicely, again, with the contrast. As for overall size, what you're going to see is 2 45/50s wrapping a 20-inch wheel. And of course, this one going to be off-roading. Well, it naturally comes standard with all-wheel drive. Well, just because the X-Line has stepped up and wanting to go off-road doesn't mean that, well, the average Telluride owner might just want to battle the, well, urban jungle. That means, well, it's got to have decent horsepower across the board. Don't put a 4-cylinder in here for those people that don't like to get muddy. Step it up, and that's what, well, Kia does. Across the board, 3.8-liter V6 engine delivers 291 horses and 262 foot-pounds of torque. And, well, just to help keep things smooth, either on the road or off, it comes coupled with an 8-speed automatic transmission. One area I haven't talked about in a while, we're going to dive in deeper like we used to, starting here with the Telluride, specifically about ingress into the vehicle. Certainly across the board, it has gotten easier, both with getting rid of the traditional key related to the ignition, as well as interacting with the key fob. Instead, a lot of vehicles are going with smart key systems relating to proximity entry, and of course the Telluride has done that well from day one. Now, as you see it, the vehicle obviously is locked, indicated by those mirrors that are tucked in. As you come up close with the key in your pocket, it's certainly going to welcome you with open mirrors and telling you, well, it's time to climb inside. Do that simply with sliding your hand in here. The vehicle unlocks with ease. Now, if you notice, the X-Line has body colored handles, making it nice and sleek. Once you open it up, climb inside, no issues. When you go to walk away, there is a slight indentation right here. Just rub your finger slightly across it. You'll hear it lock and visually tuck away. Now, one thing I do like is if you happen to pass this vehicle and you go, oh shoot, I don't need to get inside it, you walk away. Certainly these mirrors have opened up, but once you get far enough away, it says, oh, goodbye, and slides back in. With the big changes seen in the front, naturally got to do it here at the back end to, well, pair things up. And where you first start is with the tail light assembly. Now, it has, at first glance, similarities, and certainly it has the overall styling, but last in previous years, this waterfall effect was here, did not sweep across. What was over here was more of the backup lighting, and it kind of had this awkward separation. Now it totally blends all the way across. Naturally, the turn signals built in here as well as hazards. Down below, that is where you're going to see the reverse lights. This here lighting up in white, and of course directing the light, and it makes sense to have the reverse lights down low, certainly illuminating the ground. This seems to be more of just a reflector. As for the other designs, the lower fascia, like I mentioned in the front, this has been changed as well. Before, a little bit more kind of tucked in, this having a little bit more blunt force trauma and basically looking a little bit more robust, and the dual pipes still looking somewhat similar. Now let's dive in to see what awaits when it comes to cargo. As I mentioned earlier, with these raised roof rails, transforming this top to a versatile cargo area or whatever you need to throw up there means it's going to help minimize what might need to be thrown on the inside. That's helpful for the family on the go, because in those cases, you need more people on the inside, cargo on the outside. Now, before we dive in, let's talk about what's going back here. First, huge bank of glass and safety to boot. Backup sensors, backup camera, as well as front sensors, and you pretty much have surround view on this vehicle. It's almost like you got cameras at every angle when you need it. We'll dive in a little bit closer. We look at the LCD display up front. Lastly, body color all the way around, and we talked about those ingredients, the extra pizzazz on the lower and front fascias, as well as upgrades here. Now let's dive in. First off, to get inside, how do you do it? Got the electronic release certainly right here, the button on the key fob, and I did do kind of the dance back and forth here, swinging my legs. Could not find any motion activated, so, well, not a big deal. Electronic release with a power rear hatch on this model. Once you dive in, what you're going to see, of course, is traditional 3 rows. For the Telluride, you have up to 8 passengers, but here specifically with the captain chairs on the X-Line, that means it's going to be diminished 1, not a big deal. As for cargo space, everything laid flat. That's going to be around about 87 cubic feet, 46 cubic feet behind the second row, and with the laying here, leaving these up as you see them, is around 21 cubic feet. Now let's dive in a little bit closer to see how you operate all this. Here at the third row, first thing you'll notice is kind of a 60-40 split, 3 areas for occupants, as well as foldable rear headrest, a telescoping one here in the middle. Those all can, of course, be laid flat when they're not needed. Now, as for this area, again, 21 cubic feet, and I do like to see, well, is there anything that lies beneath here? And once you kind of get rid of this mat and pull it up, you will notice this hard casing floor. You can pull it out and slide it into a groove. That'll keep it in place. It doesn't automatically hinge and stay. Also a nice tonneau cover that stores in here when you don't need it. That's going to allow you to hide valuable items when you need to. Certainly a great place to store it. But as for the cargo area, really tons of acreage down here as well. Now, when you go to lower this flooring, one thing I noticed is this backing comes down and is Velcroed pretty much to this floor, and that makes it sometimes difficult to find its true seating, which means you just need a little extra pop to squeeze it back. One thing I would like is for this to be tucked in a little bit nicer. It does seem to kind of change depending on where the seat backs are, because naturally the back seat passengers can recline back and forth, so it makes this bubble out just a hair. Not a big deal. But basically, to lay these flat, if your headrest was up, when you pull that, it pulls them down. That's going to allow it to lay flat real nice and easy. Same on that side. Obviously, if you got a big item that needs to go to the second row, best of all is there's buttons here on the left side that allow you to just simply press it and it tumbles those forward. As we move from the outside in, this is where you stop talking about the, well, off-road worthiness and talk more about the creature comforts, because just because you can go off the beaten path doesn't mean you want to feel every bump in the road. And certainly Kia steps up the inside to make all passengers comfortable. As for overall layout, you're seeing 2+2+3 design. If you go with some of the other models, you can put more of a bench styling here to get maximum passenger deliverability. In this case, we got more of a captain's chairs, center aisle, but certainly individualized attention. These very wide, robust seating, and of course, extra capabilities to dial in specifically how comfortable you are. If you need to go to the back, really climb in, and you're a little bit taller like me, well, this is naturally where you're going to ingress, and they make it real nice and easy. 2 buttons, one here on the lower thigh or on the upper shoulder. Just simply press it. It's going to tumble it half forward and slide it all in one fell swoop. That allows even myself to climb in here, grabbing here, watching my head, and really find a space. And we'll see how comfortable that is in just a second. Then to slide it back, one thing to note, don't put it in the vertical movement yet. Keep it like this, slide it back, get to the position you want, whether it's all the way back or whatever. Then once you push it there, you'll hear it lock in. The other option is if you want to lay this flat, again, you have the button at the back, or if you're here, there is a handle, again, on the lower thigh area. Just simply pull there. That's going to lay it flat. And if you notice, it's going to lock it into place. Just an extra level of safety. When you want to release it, again, pull the handle. It's going to ease back. The handle is also good for anyone that wants to, well, handle the long trips, meaning just squeeze up on it. As you're seated, press back, and you've got great reclinability. Adding to that overall comfort is here on the side in the form of, well, nice sun shading. Just simply pull it up, and you can just lock it into place. And last, one you wouldn't expect, is right here on the door handle. Not the up and down for the window, but heated and cooled seats for both back occupants on the second row. One issue that backseat drivers, even those in the nosebleed section, could have is, well, ventilation. With that being so far up there, how does the climate control work in the back? And if you look down here, typical center position for climate control is just not found, even though you do find 2 cup holders, nice and convenient for the second row. As you dive down a little bit further, this is just for connectivity in the form of traditional power outlet and a household outlet as well. Well, don't stop there. USB connections here on either seat for the rear occupants. But where is the climate control? Well, look up above. You're going to find it right up here, nice and simple. Auto controls, dialing in specific temperature for back seat passengers, as well as overall fan speed and the various mode selects. When testing out the nosebleed section, really comes down to a couple of things: the ingress, the capabilities, the headbanging affair potential, and just overall legroom numbers. So let's start really with ingress. Pressing this button here, sliding that forward. What you're going to find is really to climb into the back of any third row SUV is really just angling in. And the way I'll do it is basically turning sideways like this, keeping a hold of the seat back, and just simply angling in, and not too bad. With the headrest in place, makes it fairly simple. Then what you want to do as the backseat driver is just simply slide that back. You can get it to its furthest position, which I'll do here, and just ease it back and locks into place. Interestingly, quite comfortable. Plenty of headroom, and the way that works is this ceiling space here is flat, then actually copes up just a little bit, give you a lot more extra headroom up here. I do have the seat back angled back just a hair, making it more comfortable. As for legroom, not too shabby. On paper, around about 31 inches of space, and I do have the second row in its furthest position. Overall numbers up front, you're going to have around about 44 inches of legroom. Second row around about 42. Here in the third row, 31. What that means for the second row is, honestly, that can be slid up just a little bit. 41 inches is a little bit extravagant for the second row. So when there's full-size adults like myself, I would slide those forward, really giving you a little bit of extra space. Better yet, with this second row captain chairs, you can naturally take your inner leg on both sides and slide it forward. Now that's mentioning that you don't have a third occupant. Now arguably, with 2 full-size adults back here, the third position right in the middle really just isn't going to work. So when you have full size, I would say this would be a 2+2+2 design. Third one, just for elbow space. Creature comforts for the third row occupant. For the driver's side is going to be a single cup holder with a little bit of extra space over there. For the passenger side, you're going to have dual cup holders. That way the center occupant and the passenger side occupant can kind of battle it out of who gets what. Also, you're going to have USB-C connections for either side. One thing to note, USB-C seems to be the standard across this vehicle, so the old USB-A's, you might need to upgrade. The nosebleed section isn't necessarily the bad seat in the house, giving you great views, specifically when you look up. Both the front bank of glass above the front occupants and the huge bank of glass encompassing the roof for the back occupants. When the driver takes pole position, he'll have everything he needs at his fingertips, plus a whole lot more, starting with the huge oversized infotainment system and the digital readout for the gauge cluster. Now, first starting over here, really Kia is defaulting to this kind of non-distract screen. That way it's basically saying, hey driver, keep your eyes on the road, don't look at this. But when you need to, there are shortcuts down below. Just simply hit the corresponding button, map, nav, radio, so on, click that. Then this cluster changes over, in this case, entertainment. Now, the one thing I noticed is it is kind of an arm stretch away when it comes to utilizing some of these options. The volume right where you need it. Of course, there's controls for that on the steering wheel, but the tune select, which I really do like for the satellite radio, because you're dialing from station to station versus old AM FM, which is more of a scan effect. This is just a little bit too far over. Now, when you interact with it on the steering wheel, these are going to be all your presets. If you do hold it for an extra second, it does allow for you to select between station and station, which is not a bad option, but I tended to have too much of a heavy thumb and I'd skip 7 or 8. So either way, you do have this for shortcuts for the media, or these over here. So I'd say this one is for your passenger. When they get mad at your radio selection, they can select. Otherwise, you're going to use the steering wheel options. The gauge cluster is revolutionary and where the industry is headed, putting everything in digital display, digital readout for the analog look for the speedometer and tach, and of course right there in the middle, tons of information. Now up here on the left side is your speed. Even better, this translates up above on the heads-up display, allowing you to really see everything without glancing down. Now if you do need to change the various selections over there, you would just simply do that by scrolling through the control on the steering wheel, selecting all the various functionalities, as well as the pages that you can select going from one side, going across this way, and selecting the various options. Looking more at the steering wheel, this is going to be your cruise control settings over here, as well as toggling up and down for the LCD display gauge cluster. Cruise control, pretty simple, just basically turn it on up here. This is going to be your lane awareness, keeping you in the lane, that autonomous feel I kind of mentioned and hinted at the beginning. You can turn that on, as well as the spacing between you and other drivers. Basically, once this is all set, all the way right down to the steering wheel assist, that's going to allow you to pretty much keep this steering wheel, barely interact with it, because you're going to get nice light and slight tugs on the steering wheel when it's trying to keep you centered. Not meaning you can keep your eyes over here and don't regard, but pretty much keeping your eyes straight ahead. Even better, the gauge cluster, which is very difficult to see on camera, that's going to have this radar-like feel. It's going to have angular lines implying the road ahead. Also, it's going to have little images of cars like in front of you, letting you know how close you're becoming, and naturally it's going to set the distance. Even better, it has kind of ghost images to the right of those angles, that if a vehicle is in the right lane up ahead of you, as it's coming down, you'll see it like a block coming down the side. Once it gets to the blind spot awareness, you'll see a radar angled lines that let you know, hey, there's an alert to your back right or back left or what have you. But this vehicle really has that whole surround feeling of protection. Diving into some extra area of protection is these cameras. Let me just put them on so you can see what's going on. First off, you're going to have the backup camera to be expected, but this surround view is basically taking all these cameras, integrating them into this 360 view. That again is going to allow you to see in real time what's happening around you. Now, typically that doesn't translate over here to the gauge cluster, but in this case it does, changing that digital readout, in that case for analog, to this camera that is shooting down the side. Imagine that being, of course, a vehicle. As you're going down the road, there's a vehicle in your blind spot. That's going to give you an extra glance to look over before you go. Obviously, go to the left side. That's going to take over your speed. and you can simply see what's down there. Now, I mentioned earlier about the headrest. In this case, you'll see one up can create kind of a blind spot for the rear view mirror, but of course Kia has thought of that and switching their mirrors over to a camera display like you see here. Now, one thing to note, that camera is on the outside right above the back glass, so it can get dirty and there is no actual operation unless you physically go out and clean it, versus other models I've seen on other manufacturers that put that rear view camera inside the vehicle, which means when the windshield wiper goes over and cleans the back windshield, then it naturally cleans the glass, making it clear. So it wouldn't hurt maybe if Kia changes the location of this rear view mirror camera to the inside somewhere, but either way, a simple cleaning of the lens every now and then helps it stay sharp and clear. Climate control, not rocket science. Dual zones up front, nice digital controls right here on either side. Mode select in the form of this button here, just simply dial through and you can find your favorite setting. As for rear controls, you can select it here as well. You're going to see that pop up for simplicity, basically allowing you to kind of dial over specifically which temperature, and that integration of just using your finger sweeping across is so much more innovative than some manual operation. And you can change the vent select right here. This integration and this screen really allows for parents to be in control of what's going on. Also, be in control, let's look at one other feature. Starting at the home screen, just simply swipe over, and one thing we're looking for is what we call passenger talk. I tested this out with some people in the back area and just simply talked like this, and I said, hey, what does it sound like? And they said, oh, actually I can hear you very clearly. They did kind of say it sounded like we're at an airplane, the pilot talking. Doesn't mean it sounds bad, it just means it sounds like, hey, someone's saying the fasten seatbelt sign is on, we got 2 minutes before we land, whatever's going on. This allows you again to project your voice forward. You're looking straight ahead as a parent, for example, and just simply using the built-in microphone system to clearly articulate to backseat drivers, because otherwise you're going to be parent and you're going to turn around, and that means you're not looking at the road anymore, but instead you're a passenger, and that doesn't help for anyone. So put that passenger talk mode on, allows you really to interact with backseat drivers. Between the pilot and co-pilot, you'll find this knob here. At first glance, you think it's the control knob for the infotainment, but second glance, you'll naturally see it's for all-wheel drive. And for a novice like me that wants the vehicle to know and do everything, well, this makes it nice and easy to select the various functions. Everything from comfort, sport, smart, snow, of course, and econo. Just dial it in specifically to what you're looking for. And then, of course, lock if you need to. Now, I mentioned that the backseat drivers have heated and cooled seats. Well, so do the front passengers. Simply toggle up. Got 3 selection modes for both heated and cooled, and just simply dial through them to turn it off. Down below, what you're going to find is connectivity in the form of traditional car outlet, as well as traditional USB-C and USB-A right here. Now, throughout the rest of the vehicle, you're going to find the USB-Cs, but the driver gets all selections. Lastly is who needs cords. When you do have the wireless charging capability, just simply slide your phone right there and you'll see the light come on to indicate it's charging. That does it for this edition where we're in our test drive behind the wheel of the 2023 Kia Telluride X-Line edition, giving a little bit extra height, some beefy roof rails, but still delivering what we've all come to love, which is the interior comfort. Also, don't forget 3 rows of overall passenger delivery, and of course the versatility of, well, taking cargo when needed, and especially with the off the beaten option, well, you could, well, turn this into a camping vehicle, strapping your extra resources on top. Now, as always, thank you for watching this edition of Road Warrior. Keep both hands on the wheel and eyes straight ahead.